It was during about the 14th to the 17th century that this period is ranked among the most influential periods in the history of Europe because of their contributions of their ideas and developments of like astronomy, humanist philosophy, printing press, vernacular languages and stuff that we now use in our present time. Now, what was this period of more of their ideas and developments that have contributed to our present time? Time to find out in our very first episode of OneSet Klavier. Before we begin this very interesting topic which we'll be discussing, which is very broad, and I will actually do my best to make it as brief and easy to understand as possible. I'd like to introduce myself to you all. My name is JB. I'm a first year college student, and I hope you will enjoy this. Be reminded that this video is for educational purposes. Now we'll be discussing about the Renaissance period. Now, Renaissance, whose literal translation from French into English is termed as rebirth. Now, the Renaissance period in Europe from the 14th to the 17th century was regarded as the cultural bridge between the Middle Ages and the modern history. It was a fervent period of European cultural, artistic, political, and economic rebirth following the Middle Ages. It is where the rise of humanistic thought, the recovery of the literary and artistic heritage of ancient Greece and Rome, the increase of innovation and discovery, the growth of commercial enterprise, the rise of the bourgeoisie class, and of the Protestant Reformation. These were all of the events and developments that happened during this kind of period. We also have the rise of astronomy, humanist philosophy, the printing press, vernacular language and writing and painting and sculpture technique, world exploration, and even famous literary works such as of Shakespeare's works. It started as a cultural movement in Italy, specifically in Florence, in the late medieval period, and later spread to the rest of Europe, marking the beginning of the early modern age. It was a period of great change for European culture, literature, art, and music. Now let us discuss about what the economy and the society of the Renaissance period was during the 14th to the 17th century. We have here that the trade between regions brought wealth to towns, cities, and individuals. The middle class continued to grow in numbers and influence. Rulers glorified themselves and their principalities. Then there were also impressive palaces and country houses, decoration with new artwork and artifacts from ancient civilizations. There also was lavish entertainment, private chapels that staffed by professional musicians. Well, the most prevalent societal change during the Renaissance was the fall of feudalism and the rise of a capitalist market economy. The increased trade and the labor shortage caused by the Black Death during the Middle Ages gave rise to something of a middle class. Workers could demand wages and good living conditions, and so serfdom ended. At the same time, rulers also began to realize that they could maintain their power without the church. Unlike during the Middle Ages, they rely upon the power of the church, but unlike the Renaissance period, they soon began to realize that they could rule out their powers even without the support of the church. There were no more knights in service to the king and peasants in service to the lord of the manor. Now having money became more important than allegiances. Now let's go on to the rediscovery of ancient texts. Now why the rediscovery of ancient texts? Next main cause of the Renaissance was the rediscovery by European thinkers of ancient Greek and Roman ideas and texts. The idea of rebirth captures the aims of scholars and artists to restore the learning, ideals, and values of ancient Greece and Rome before. This is where the intellectual culture of the Renaissance sparkled because of the rediscovery of these ancient philosophies and ideas which had largely been ignored in Europe throughout the Middle Ages. And this is where humanism came into act. Humanism was an intellectual movement typified by a revived interest in the classical world and studies, which focused not on religion, but on what it is to be human. Now, it was during the 15th century that humanism had spread across Europe. In general, Renaissance humanism was the study of ancient Greek and Roman texts, with the goal of promoting new norms and values in society. These norms and views varied from those at that time because they focused less heavily on religious worldview. Instead, Renaissance humanists used ancient texts to promote a worldview based on logic and reason. This was to be accomplished through the study of the Studia Humanitatis, which is today is known as the humanities. That is why we have humanities and social scientists strand. This includes topics such as grammar, history, poetry, and philosophy. Humanists during at this time promoted the idea that citizens should be educated in these topics in order to allow them to participate in the social and political life of their society. This was a fundamental shift from the feudalistic and religious life that was the reality for most people in Europe in the Middle Ages. These humanists and their actions are considered very important to the emergence and the growth of the overall Renaissance. Now let's tackle about the Renaissance music. Now during this period of the Renaissance, we could see that music had a big change. There was a gradual change when it comes to music. Now what are those things? Let me give you a few. Instrumental music increased in both importance and production. Now during the Renaissance period, there was a sudden increase in the importance and more production of musical compositions were about to rise during this age. Music was also affected by the migrations of the musicians. People all around Europe during those times came out to, specifically in Florence, Italy, and influenced music. So there is also what you call the changing character of vocal music. Church music changed more gradually. Chant melodies were more freely treated and still served as subjects for masses. Masses and motets were being written for 4, 5, or even 6 voices rather than 4, unlike before in the Middle Ages, in the medieval ages, that they only had more like 2 to 4 voices. Now these were some of the developments when it comes to the Renaissance music. We have 5 developments. Number 1, an international style developed due to composers from Northern Europe working in Italy. Just like what I mentioned earlier, just now, that because of the migration of musicians in Italy, music was changed. It was influenced by these various musicians from various places in Europe. Number 2, new rules for counterpoint controlled dissonance and elevated thirds and sixths in importance. Number 3, the predominant textures were imitative counterpoint and homophony. Number 4, printing made notated music available to a wider public, including amateurs. Like I mentioned, it was during this time that the printing press was developed, and it gave way to the development of printed texts of musical pieces during this time. Number 5, the Reformation generated changes in music for both Protestant and Catholic churches. This was also the period when the event called as the Reformation had also had a big influence in music, changes in music. Now let's move forward. Renaissance music is a vocal and instrumental music written and performed in Europe during the Renaissance era. Music was increasingly freed from medieval constraints, and more variety was permitted in range, rhythm, harmony, form, and notation. Now, since there were not much of constraints anymore during this era, Composers found ways to make music expressive of the text they were setting. Secular music absorbed techniques from sacred music and vice versa. Popular secular forms such as the chanson and madrigal spread throughout Europe. Most written music written during this period is intended to be sung, either as large choral pieces in church or as songs or madrigals. But non-vocal music flourished too, as technology enabled musical instruments to be more expressive and agile. That is why also the instruments were also very prominent during at this age. Pieces could now be written specifically for instruments as well. Now there were also certain genres of music during at this time. Common sacred genres were the mass, the motet, the madrigal spirituale, and the laude. Of course, there were also the secular music. The main types were the German Lied, Italian Fotola, and not that too much. I'll just be posting it here. And do note that an enormous diversity of musical styles and genres flourished during the Renaissance, including what we have mentioned ago, the masses, the motets, the madrigals, chansons, even accompanied songs, instrumental dances, and many others.